What's up everybody, Commander Sanctum here, and today we have a brand new deck tech using Clive, Ifrit's Dominant. Clive is a 5/5 human noble warrior for 4 red that has, when Clive enters, you may discard your hand, then draw cards equal to your devotion to red. You can also pay 4 red to transform Clive into Ifrit, Warden of Inferno, a 9/9 saga demon that has 3 chapters. The first is Lunge, which lets Ifrit fight up to 1 target creature, and the second and third both have the same ability, Brimstone, which lets you add 4 red mana, and, if Ifrit has 3 or more lore counters on it, exile it and return it to the battlefield face up. Clive is more of a value engine type of commander than a payoff card, and with his disparate abilities, there are a few different ways to build him. You could go aggro, burn, discard, but the strategy I think will work best with him is Devotion. Not only is Devotion a somewhat underutilized mechanic, it's also an interesting way to build a deck, since you need to be more focused on the mana pips and cards than anything else. With this deck tech, we'll be doing just that. We'll be using a ton of permanent cards that have high red mana pips in their cost to get our Devotion as high as possible. This will then culminate in either drawing a ton of cards with Clive's Devotion ability, or simply using another Devotion payoff to try to end the game. With that, let's get into the card highlights. Let's start off with the cards that give us some sort of advantage for having high Devotion. Unfortunately, there really aren't too many mono red cards that actually care about Devotion, but the ones we do have are good enough to use. An Axe Hardened by the Forge is a great Devotion card that can help us go wide, since he creates tokens whenever he or another creature we have dies. Thunderous Might, on the other hand, lets us go tall, letting us potentially kill our opponents with commander damage from Clive or Ifrit if we can get our Devotion high enough. Fanatic of Mogis is going to be, by far, the best Devotion payoff card we have, since it deals damage to each opponent based on our Devotion. There are going to be many times with this deck where Fanatic will be dropped onto the battlefield and it'll do 15 plus damage to everyone, easily finishing the game if cast late enough. The 2 mono red Theros gods, Purphoros Bronze-Blooded and Purphoros God of the Forge, are also great Devotion payoffs, since they'll let you have very large indestructible creatures most of the time in a deck like this. Not only that, but they also have great passive abilities as well. The God of the Forge needs no real introduction, since it's always the best card in any creature-heavy deck thanks to it doing a whopping 2 damage to each opponent whenever a creature enters on your side of the battlefield. Bronze-Blooded is nice utility thanks to it giving haste to our other creatures, and even letting us sneak attack a creature in. This can be a great way to get in some extra damage on opponents, or even temporarily increase our Devotion if need be. Now for the Devotion enabling cards. These will be some sort of permanent card that has either 2 or 3 red mana pips in their casting cost, to really make sure we can maximize our Devotion at any given point. Starting with the 3s, we have a trio of powerful creatures in Akroma, Angel of Fury, Dracuset, Maw of Flames, and Cavalier of Flame, all cards that can either attack very well or provide some sort of utility for us when they enter. Akroma is going to be one of the best attackers we'll have access to, since she has so many evasive keywords and even fire breathing, letting us eke out some extra damage if we have extra mana to use. Dracuset is another great attacker, since he'll let you start sniping off your opponent's smaller creatures, or simply let you get in some extra damage on your opponents. Cavalier has a multitude of abilities, including direct damage, card draw, and enabling haste, making it an excellent choice for many different scenarios. Some more 3-pip creatures include Cyclops Gladiator, which can be a great way to deal with your opponent's defending creatures, and Kiki-Jiki Mirror Breaker, which is another great way to either get another copy of one of your better creatures out, or even temporarily increase your Devotion. Since Kiki-Jiki creates an exact token copy of a creature, that creature's mana cost will also go into effect when counting Devotion, making it one of the best ways to pump up your red mana pips before playing one of your Devotion payoffs. Obsidian Fireheart is one of my personal favorite red cards, and works extremely well in this deck. Putting blaze counters on your opponent's lands for a cheap cost of 3 mana is not only a good way to finish someone off, but also just one of the coolest abilities in all of Magic. Even the reminder text says the land continues to burn. I mean, come on, how awesome is that? Goblin Chain Whirler is a great creature that can enter and wipe an opponent's board of smaller creatures, and works even better when paired with Torbrand, Thane of Redfell, which adds 2 damage whenever a red source we have deals damage. Since the Goblin does 1 damage to each opponent and creature when it enters, if Torbrand is out, it'll instead do 3 damage to each opponent and each creature they control instead, making for a nice little Anger of the Gods type of effect. With all the damage that will be spewed out to our opponents, War Elemental is a great choice, since we'll have the capability to make it very large very quickly in most scenarios, while also being a great addition to our Devotion count with its 3 mana pips. Speaking of dealing and increasing damage, there are a number of damage amplifiers that happen to include 3 red mana pips in their costs. City on Fire and Fiery Emancipation are 2 such examples that triple any damage done from a source you control. That's right, not double, but triples the damage, making these extremely effective ways to end games very quickly. City on Fire even has Convoke, meaning if you have enough creatures out, you may be able to cast it for a significantly reduced cost, or even free in some cases. Gratuitous Violence only doubles damage, and only from creatures you control instead of any source, but is still a great include in this deck thanks to its 3 mana pips and its cost. Now for the cards that have 2 mana pips instead of 3. To start out with, we have a few that enhance our other creatures in some shape or form. Enduring Courage gives all our other creatures a nice power boost and haste, meaning we can attack with them immediately and advantageously, more often than not. It even returns to the battlefield when killed, making it a strong option for our devotion theme. Archetype of Aggression not only buffs our creatures by giving them trample, but also removes trample from our opponent's creatures, stopping green stompy decks right in their tracks. Berserker's Onslaught enhances our attacking creatures, giving them double strike. When paired with Archetype of Aggression or even Enduring Courage, this card alone can easily finish off any opponents from pretty much out of nowhere. There are also quite a few options that can do direct damage when they enter. Inferno Titan and Overlord of the Boiler Bilges are 2 such examples that are very similar to each other. When they both enter or attack, they do 3 damage divided, or 4 damage to a single target, respectively, making for a great way to snipe off some creatures or get some extra damage onto opponents. The Overlord even has Impending, meaning you can cast it for cheaper as just an enchantment. This still works for us, since all we care about are the mana pips in its cost, giving it a bit more protection from removal if we need it. Sunspine Lynx is essentially a price of progress on a stick, dealing damage to each player equal to the number of non-basics they have. Since we're mono red, we don't really need many non-basic lands for our deck to function, making this an excellent way to deal a ton of damage to our opponents, while minimizing its effect on us. This even makes it so that players can't gain life and damage can't be prevented, 2 effects that would make it very hard for our deck to actually win, making this card an all-around bomb for us. Damage is really the name of the game for this type of deck, and Defiler of Instinct and Razorkin Needlehead are 2 more great cards to achieve this. The Defiler can even make our spells cheaper mana-wise if need be, letting us cast more spells in a turn, while the Razorkin is a great way to stop a card draw heavy deck from overrunning the entire table with their card advantage. Solfim Mayhem Dominus is yet another damage doubler, albeit one that only doubles non-combat damage instead of all damage. Still, from what we've seen with the previous 3 cards alongside the Defiler and Razorkin, there are quite a few sources in this deck that deal non-combat damage, making for a still effective damage amplifier. Finally, we have a trio of legendary creatures that all provide some sort of utility for us to make sure our deck can function properly. Urabrask the Hidden is another haste enabler for us, but takes it a step further, since it also makes our opponent's creatures enter tapped. Not only does this stop their own haste creatures, it also makes it much harder for them to block, letting us sneak in some extra damage in combat. Feldon of the Third Path is a great way to temporarily get back one of our better creatures that has already been killed. Similar to Kiki Jiki, the creature token will count towards devotion as well, letting you sneak in some extra mana pips before dropping a payoff card. Atali Primal Storm is a fun card to use to play other people's spells. If you're lucky enough, this could even be effects that red is bad at, such as land ramp or enchantment removal, or could include permanent spells that have red mana pips of their own, increasing your devotion from cards outside your own deck. Speaking of mana ramp, we have a few more unconventional ways to achieve this in Koth Fighter of Resistance and Neheb the Eternal. Koth lets you search up a basic mountain, or even snipe off creatures, making for a great land ramp and removal source, all in one. Neheb provides some temporary mana in your post-combat main phase. While not permanent, the sudden influx of mana can be a great way to cast your entire hand, depending on how much life your opponents have lost from your first main phase or combat step. I would also be remiss if I didn't mention Mana Geyser, by far the best mana ramp card in red. While this doesn't do anything with devotion, since it's not a permanent, it is going to be the absolute best way to get a huge surge of mana in one go, to then play your devotion-enabling permanent spells, making it an absolute must in any Clive deck. We also have some effective mana rocks to help make sure we can cast all of our high casting cost devotion enablers. Cursed Mirror and Glittering Stockpile both provide us with a red mana, while also increasing our devotion count, 2 absolutely crucial things in a deck such as this. The stockpile can even give us a surge of mana if we need it at any given time, and the mirror can become the best creature on the battlefield, letting us use our opponent's creatures against them, or simply re-triggering our own creatures enter the battlefield effects, like with Inferno Titan or Overlord of the Boiler Bilges. There are also 2 devotion-based mana rocks that are absolute auto-includes in a deck like this. Altar of the Pantheon only nets us 1 mana, and potentially 1 life depending on the situation, but more importantly, automatically increases our devotion to red by 1. This makes it effectively like one of the previous mana rocks, which both have 1 red mana pip in them, making it a must-have. There's also Nyx's Lotus, which adds mana equal to our devotion. Since we're a deck all about devotion to red, this will, more times than not, add an absolute ton of mana for us, making it yet another extremely efficient source of mana to cast our high casting cost spells. We also have a few good sources of, well, I won't call it card draw, but more like card advantage, which is always an important aspect of any deck, especially when playing mono red. Count on Luck, Impulse draws us every upkeep. While not the best ability in the world, it does cost triple red, making for a great source of devotion for us. Chandra, Torch of Defiance also has an Impulse draw ability, but does more than that. It can act as a source of mana ramp or creature removal as well, making it a nice modular card for what we need it for at any given moment. Stolen Strategy is like a less effective Atali Primal Storm, but still lets us get access to potentially some of our opponent's best cards. Again, since we're mono red, this will be one of the best ways for us to get that crucial land ramp, card draw, or enchantment removal that we otherwise don't have the greatest access to normally. Here's an example deck list utilizing all the previously mentioned cards. Additional cards include some more much needed card draw in Big Score and Demand Answers, non-devotion based mana ramp in Ironcrag Feat and Wayfarer's Bauble, and additional utility in Triple Triad and Price of Progress. Final Fantasy XVI has become one of my favorites of the series, with Clive being one of the most interesting protagonists as well, so needless to say, I was very interested in seeing his card when the set was being revealed. While not really being as much of a payoff card as I had hoped, I do love the inclusion of devotion on his card. Not only is it an underutilized mechanic, but it's also very flavorful to his character as well. The fact that he could draw cards equal to your devotion to red is pretty nutty. Card draw has never really been Red's strong suit, so being able to potentially draw 10 plus cards as soon as he hits the battlefield is really nothing to scoff at. That's why I think making a devotion based Clive deck is the best route to go. The value engine Clive becomes when focused on such a strategy is so important for the deck to function because, again, red can be a bit lacking when it comes to draw. The one thing I dislike about this, however, is the fact that devotion is so undersupported. There are only 9 cards that deal with devotion that can be included in this deck, and this deck tech has them all. Of them, Fanatic of Mogis and Clive himself are really the only ones that take full advantage of the devotion mechanic. 2 cards out of 100 is not the best rate when it comes to effectively utilizing a strategy. And yes, we can bump that number up to 4 thanks to MYTHOS, Shrine to Nyx, and Nyx's Lotus, each giving us a ton of mana in such a deck, but those aren't really ways to actually win with devotion. This isn't to say that the deck isn't strong or won't work. Thankfully, all the devotion enablers are great cards in their own right, it's just that the devotion mechanic itself isn't utilized that well. Unfortunately, there's not much we can really do about that until we return to Theros or some other set that may focus on devotion, so only time will tell as to whether or not this really cool mechanic gets the attention it deserves. Regardless, if you like the idea of devotion to a color, or just playing a bunch of really cool red spells, give this deck a try. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised at how fun it can be. I hope you enjoyed watching this deck tech on Clive, Ifrit's Dominant. The full deck list outlined in this video can be found at the Archideck link at the top of the description. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to drop a like and comment, as well as subscribe to the channel for more Magic content. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.